Is my hair okay?
Very nice.
Looks splendid.
I really like that.
So, welcome back to We Talk. Today I am honored to be here with the Honorable Mike Morrice. We're going to talk a little bit about his journey and learn more about him. So first of all, I want to know, do you like your job?
Oh, it's a privilege to get to do what I do. And anytime a person in life gets to feel like what they're doing is kind of magic, that's how lucky for that person. That's how I feel about this work. It kind of feels like what I was meant to be doing. And some days in particular feels a bit like magic. When I can be in Ottawa advocating on behalf of someone in our community and hopefully making some progress for them, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing right now. And it's a real privilege.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome and really beautiful to hear. So what things in your youth led you to take this career path?
It's a good question. I guess it wasn't something I imagined as a young person. I never expected to run for office or be an elected person. And even coming out of university, as you might know, I started this nonprofit called Sustainable Water of the Region, and that wasn't like part of a 5-year plan. Mm-hmm. But I guess maybe the most helpful or meaningful part of my childhood that has allowed me to do what I'm doing today is that I was raised in a really loving home. I had such unconditional love and support from my parents, and that's a privilege. And I think that's given me the foundation to really live out my best self. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful to my parents for the kind of upbringing that I had.
Yeah, with gratitude to all parents out there for their kindness and unwavering support that nurtures leaders. Do you have any things you wish to say to youth out there?
Well, I guess when I connect with young people, what I try to make clear is that the reality is that this is a difficult time that we're living through, whether it's anxiety with respect to the climate crisis, whether it's some of the mental health challenges that are very real in our community. And so I think it's really important that young people know that their voices matter. And when young people choose to engage in our democracy, whether that's in protest or whether it's in civic life in some way, your voices are needed and important. And I'll give you just one small example. When I was knocking on doors in the campaigns I've been a part of, I had hundreds and hundreds of people helped us knock on doors. And some folks that joined were high school students even. And what I found when we spoke with people on their front door is some of the longest conversations with residents were ones where I was with a high school student. And often because the person at their door would say, okay, fine, you're running for office, but what are you doing here? You can't even vote yet. And there's I got a sense of appreciation for how that high school student had chosen to engage in this way. And then that person would share for themselves why they were supporting me or part of the campaign in some way. And so I think examples like that showed me that, it is true that people in our community are looking to hear from young people, particularly knowing that the challenges we're facing are going to affect young people more significantly than anyone else. You will live through climate chaos as the decades progress. Young people will live through housing and what owning a home or renting a home in our community means for a young person is very different than what it meant for my parents when they bought their first home in the 70s. And so I think in light of all that, people like me are making decisions that affect young people more than anything. And so I think it's important that young people know that their voices matter and that people like me need to be hearing from them.
Immensely true. And I would echo everything that you said. I agree that youth like myself have huge potential, and especially with our unique energy and ability to make change for years to come, I think it's really important.
Yeah, agreed.
Is there anything you would have done differently when you were, for example, in my shoes as a high school student?
That's a tough question. I guess it's tough to reflect back, not really knowing. But I guess if I think about folks who are in high school today, yourself and others, if I can offer any advice, I guess there's some truth to some cliches. But one of the cliches is this whole thing of following your passion. I was in a privileged position where I was given space as a young person to explore what I was passionate about. And my trajectory has had a lot of twists and turns along the way. But something I've learned is that inevitably life has gotten hard in different ways. When I've had the privilege to pursue what I care about most, I've been most effective. And I didn't know when I was in high school what it was I cared about most, but I was able to experiment and dabble in, volunteering with this club in high school, or in my case, it was in a faith community that I engaged with quite a bit. And each of those experiments got me closer to identifying what it was that I was most passionate about. And as I got closer to that, when things have gotten hard, so as an example, I'm a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with stage 1 testicular cancer just under 5 years ago now. I'm healthy now, but that diagnosis came in when I was in the midst of an election campaign in 2019. And one example of that was a tough day, but I never even considered pausing the campaign because what I was doing felt so existential to me. And so whether I have, 7 days, 7 years, or 70 years left, I wouldn't change a thing because I'm doing what kind of lights me up the most. And so I think as a young person, it's so important to have space in your life, to have the reflection internally and to experiment in community involvement so that you can tap into whatever might light you up the most. Because my sense is for you, Elaine, or for other young people, the closer you get to that, well, the luckier and the better for our community. Because when you find that magic, and I have the sense that you're already well on that path, then not only are you better off, but our community's better off too.
Yeah, I think having that raison d'etre, like the thing that keeps you going, is so fulfilling for a person and can give you the energy to do things despite setbacks, like in your story. And that is an incredible instance of perseverance. Thank you for sharing that with me.
It's just not always the easiest thing. It's not like you can wake up one day and say, oh, obviously I know exactly. I can say when I was in high school, again, as I shared earlier, I had no idea that this is where I'd end up being. So it can take time to have those twists and turns and to give yourself the grace and the space to kind of live towards, and that raison d'etre could shift too over time.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's okay too.
Yeah, I love what you said about giving yourself grace and space for changes in your trajectory. Like even in my 16 years of living, I have felt so many different changes in my life and things I've gone through myself. And it's just being able to wake up the next day and continue to go and to find or to work on what gives you that energy.
That's it.
Yeah.
It can be a bit of a renewable resource, I find. Is
a great way to put it.
Well, yeah, if you're focused on the things that light you up, you'll have that much more energy to keep doing more of it. And so for me, I'm not much into keeping track of administration. When I do administrative tasks, my energy goes down. When I'm chatting with someone like yourself, my energy goes way up. But there are many other people in the world for whom it's the opposite. And so for me in my life, it's really just about identifying the things that do light me up and trying to meld together the things that light me up with how I can kind of positively contribute to the world. And if I can put those two together, and that's what I think I've been able, part of why I've really enjoyed my work now as an MP, then, I'll have lots of energy to hopefully keep doing more of it.
I love that. And just curious, can you tell me about what a typical day in the life looks like for you?
Well, I guess one of the joys is there isn't really like a typical day, but I can share with you like the main aspects of my work are first of all, there's there's 3 parts to it. The one big part, if you're going to do a good job as an elected person, is listening to folks. And so I spend a lot of time, whether it's knocking on doors and chatting with people at their front door. We'll be doing backyard conversations all summer where someone might invite some neighbors over and sit in a circle and share with me concerns and priorities. I'll be meeting and have been meeting with nonprofits in our community. So a big chunk of my time goes towards listening to the perspectives, stories, and lived experiences of folks in our community. Because the reality is that my job then, the second big piece, is to take all those stories and experiences and go to Ottawa and use the legislative tools I have. And so as an MP, I can get up in question period and ask a question of the Prime Minister. I can be amending bills at committee that can address legislation that would advocate and support for folks in our community. There are many different tools I have, but the use of those tools always needs to be informed by what I hear.
People.
Exactly. And then the third piece that is really important is being accountable to our community. So once I've heard priorities like the reality that folks with disabilities disproportionately live in poverty in our community, I then brought that concern to Ottawa, was able to amend a piece of legislation that it's insufficient, but it provides some support for folks with disabilities. Well, then I come back to our community and sit down with folks with disabilities and share back with them what we got done and hear back from them where they want to see us go next. And so the cycle kind of then continues, but that's generally the flow. It doesn't give you really answer. I'm not trying to avoid the question because it doesn't give you one day, but that's how I generally spend my time, is some mix of those three, either listening to folks, advocating for folks, or coming back and being accountable to let them know, here's how we did, here's what we got, here's what we didn't get, and then listen some more to go back and continue the advocacy.
Wow. I think that's really enlightening. It's such like a transformative power that you have, being able to speak on behalf of people and bring their concerns into reality.
My hope is that's a lot of what our democracy is supposed to be about. If elected people are focused on democracy and not just on the partisan politics. A lot of the headlines that you might read often are talking about the partisan politics of it all. That's not that exciting to me. In fact, I kind of find it a bit gross a lot of days. But the democratic part of what I get to do that I shared earlier, that's where you can change lives through work like this.
Yeah.
And again, back to your earlier questions about young people, people like me are completely ineffective if we aren't informed by that advocacy from folks in the community. So I hope it also gives you a sense of how, you see somebody on TV or in the House of Commons advocating, but to get them there, it's likely hundreds of people that have helped inform and advocate for them to be in a position to then be a good advocate for them.
Awesome. Any last words for everyone out there watching this?
No, just a thanks to you, Elaine. Of course, I really enjoy conversations like these. Well, the kind of questions you're asking, I think it's so important for us to reflect a bit on this, on kind of what drives some folks. And I hope to have offered just a bit of a different perspective than might be what folks might first expect when you think of someone who's elected.
Exactly.
And that hopefully more young people, maybe as one closing thought, might consider how you might want to be involved in our democracy. Whether that's thinking about voting for the first time when you turn 18, it might be about supporting the campaign of someone running for office at any level, municipal, provincial, federal. It might even be running yourself. As of the time of filming right now, I think the youngest person in the House of Commons is probably 22 years old.
Wow,
and so you
right
might be,
out of university.
That's right. In fact, the only two requirements to run as a candidate in a federal election is to be Canadian and to be 18 years of age or older. And so that's another opportunity for a young person to consider, but also advocating on what you might care about most and making sure that your elected leaders in your community hear from you. That might be writing a letter to them. It might be asking for a meeting to talk about that issue. Whether you choose to engage directly or to advocate to an elected person, there are so many ways for young people to be involved in our democracy, and hope you might take it, and I see you doing that already, Elaine, so thanks to you.
Thank you as well, and thank you for your resonant words today. Where else can our audience find you?
Oh, sure, yeah. You can find me on social media, at Morrice Mike, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Our office is right here downtown Kitchener for folks that are watching from Waterloo Region, and online, mikemorricemp.ca.
Sounds perfect. Thank you so much today.
Thank you, Elaine. Yeah. Oh, good.
And I didn't even know things are interconnected in that way, and I think it's really inspiring that you're taking the lead in impactful organizations like Waterloo Region. So.
Well, and it's Tova's been there twice as long as I ever was. So I started the organization 15 years ago.
Okay.
She's been there for
Wow.
10 more years.